Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic, and today we're going to be looking at how Guesstimate performed at ARC's January meet. So obviously I was planning on having the Sawbot going for the January meet, and it just did not happen in time. So instead we revamped Guesstimate and put it back in the arena. And by revamped I mean I charged the batteries, put a new sheet of duct tape on as the top plate, and away we went. Actually, and the other thing too is I swapped the motor direction over, because the last time we fought Guesstimate, the motor was going in the wrong direction, so every single hit was loosening the nut on the weapon bar, and meaning that each successive hit was weaker and weaker and weaker. So that wasn't good. So we changed the direction of the motor spin so that we were spinning and hitting and tightening the nut rather than loosening it off, which means we actually get better hits this time round. So to show that off, I should say, let's go straight on into the fights. And first up, we are up against Anty-matter. Now, I don't know how this keeps happening. I keep ending up in the same draw as Anty-matter. Anty-matter just seems to be always in the same round as us, or at least it feels that way. Anty-matter is a very, very tanky wedge. It has 6mm thick a front wedge, which is what I've very recently been told. It is a printed wedge, but you still have to get through 6mm of plastic before you can touch anything if you touch the front. It was a very difficult bot to first with. This is a party, I basically never got any hits on it. Last month with Guestimate, I started managing to get hits, but with the nut issue loosening the thing off, successive hits were weaker, which meant I had a couple of good hits, and then I was just doing glancing blows. We also out of the arena ourselves against him last month. So let's see if we fare any different. So no, we did not fare any different. We actually fell completely out of the arena this time. Not only did we go into an out of the arena zone, we actually managed to fall between a gap in the Lexan and the section where that middle bit raises up. There's just a gap large enough there for Guesstimate in its very thin form factor to kind of wiggle its way down. So we actually ended up on the floor outside of the arena, which was rather scary. And I, of course, very quickly, as soon as I was up on the platform, like bouncing that way, I turned the throttle down anyway. But as soon as it went off the table, transmitter was off, and I just sat it down. I was like, nope, I don't want to touch this until the robot is safe, because yeah, it was down by people's feet, which is really not good. Because of that though, they then put cardboard in those areas to stop robots falling through the same gap. So that should stop it from happening ever again, or at least happening again for this meet. I think they're planning on actually putting something in there for the following meets. Yeah, so what can I really say about this fight? We did lots of good damage. The nut being the right way around, or the weapon spinning the right way around this time, meant that we put some really decent gouges in Anty-matter. But of course, it being that thick on the front, I was getting a lot of good hits on the front, but I wasn't really getting hits on the side or on the back, which is where I really needed to be getting those hits to actually get in and do some real damage. So, yeah, then it was just a matter of time before I pinballed myself up and out of the arena here. Yeah, so that was that fight. It is what it is. I keep losing to Anty-matter by pinballing myself around this arena. That is why I'm building control bots, is because the big heavy hitting spinners just bounce. They bounce too well to be used in this arena. So moving on to the next fight, we are up against Chihuahua, which is a robot that was previously a horizontal. Now all of its weapon stack has been moved vertical. It's the same weapon. It's a milled aluminium weapon running on an 1806, which is a pretty standard motor for this class. In the past, it has been quite powerful. It's ripped parts off of some of my robots, in particular Downforce, my rubber-sided robot. So it now being a vert was a little bit scary, especially against a horizontal, because horizontals versus verticals, it's always a bit of a luck thing as to who gets what hit and destroys the other person's weapon first. Huh. So that was quick. My first hit got him upside down. He seemed to have a similar thing to an issue I used to face with This Is a Party, where hits from horizontals would flex the chassis enough that it bounces up and over and lands upside down. Of course, when I was running This Is a Party, I ended up putting the bunny ears on to kind of allow rollover and get back on the wheels. Yeah, in his case, he couldn't quite do that. I went in for the next shot to try and like push him back over again, and it didn't work. He just ended up back upside down. I did actually take a good nice chunk out of the top of his motor mount when I did that second hit. So yeah, maybe I should have had the weapon a little bit slower, especially as my aim wasn't to do damage and was in fact to flip him back over and keep the fight going, but it is what it is. Obviously though, when he landed upside down again, his weapon motor was not powerful enough to flick him back up and self-right him. And oh look, at this weight class, you don't really have weapon motors that powerful. They're powerful enough to keep you from landing that way if they're spinning up, but if you're trying to get them to push you up and over from a standing start, you're basically not going to have that happen. But I was quite happy with that because I did come out of that relatively unscathed, which was nice. So having just fought a scary vertical spinner, we're now fighting a scary vertical spinner. We are fighting Blast Off, which is a vertical spinner that got started around kind of midway through. This is me using This As a Party. It used a snail tooth. It's like a single tooth, but it's like an interesting like snaily design. It's actually quite powerful when it can get the engagement it needs to smack people around. So same thing applies here. I was just hoping that in our collisions, I was going to break his weapon rather than him break mine. Oh, okay. So I better explain that. His battery got exposed at the end there. One of the panels inside came off and the battery may have been exposed, may not have been exposed. He just decided that that was it and he was going to tap out and give me the win for that fight. So yeah, that fight was interesting. Very early on, I got kind of in a weird spot in the pit and managed to hit the edge of the pit a couple of times, which flicked me upside down. So I was running the wrong way around. And then on top of that, he then managed to get some good hits that kind of bumped me around. So I was actually kind of worried about losing the weapon because he was hitting it up into the open air and not, when I'm the right way around, hitting it up into the actual arm that I've got here. So I was a little bit worried about losing the weapon. Thankfully we didn't, and we did manage to break his weapon instead, which, as I said, that's the aim when you're fighting another big spinning weapon. You want to break their weapon first, and we got that. I mean, this guy, he is a lot of fun to drive. I really, really do love dishing out the big hits like this. It's one of those things that, like I said, this arena is not kind of designed for that. You can see that when I hit things, I just go completely out of control. So if I could find a way to mitigate that and keep the damage that I'm doing, I absolutely would. And I would 100% keep running a spinner. But for the moment, we're going to move on, and we're also eventually going to try and get those control bots in. So, speaking of control bots, we are up against one of the better control bots in our league next. So, we're up against Tron, which is a flipper-grabber combo. It has two arms that come down over the top with a little scoop, so it can be used as a lifter or as a grabber. Either way, it has been quite effective in the past at just grabbing hold of people and steering them towards the pit. So obviously, the aim here is just to take out the weapon. Again, take out those arms that grab down and hope that we don't get grabbed in the process. Also, I should mention, Tron was actually using my wheels in that fight. So if you recognize those green wheels, those were actually mine. I lent them to Tron for this fight so that he could actually get back in the game, because I think his wheels got broken in a previous fight. So that was pretty cool. This fight does show quite how uncontrolled this robot can be. I was trying to drive it in a controlled manner, but yeah, there was lots of kind of ping-ponging around the arena off the weapon and things. Some of that I did manage to do some good hits, obviously managing to take out some of the arms at some point. He did manage to get a good grab on me and try and start going towards the pit, but thankfully we wriggled out of that one pretty well. And then this one also ended with an exposed battery. Just chipped away enough of the panels on the front of Tron that he did end up actually having the battery exposed, and he did have to count himself out for that fight. So that was good. Guesstimate is actually doing pretty well. Other than that first fight where we bounced out of the arena, we've been relatively controlled this whole time, which has been quite nice to see, considering that we've got a massive spinner on the front of this thing. So that is our round robot bracket done, and because we have 3 wins and a loss, we are straight on through into the finals, and I think we're going into the finals in 2nd place from our heat. So we're actually going up against Jaden and Mr BowJangles, the person that I normally do 2v2s with. There is no 2v2s this month, or I think for the next little while at the very least. They kind of put a hold on the 2v2s. So we're now no longer his teammate, and we're going straight up against Mr BowJangles. Last time we fought Mr BowJangles, we had the thread issue, and he then basically stopped the weapon pretty easily by using the back of his robot. Took the first couple of hits, that loosened the bolt off enough that I could then no longer do the damage to get through into him and break something important. So this time we have that fixed. Yeah, so there you go. That, having the weapon fixed and spinning the right way so the nut tightens every hit, really helped us out here. It took only 2 or 3 hits and we managed to cripple out one of those wheels, which was perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to happen here. And then of course he was crab walking over by the pit, and as soon as the pit opened, I turned the weapon off because I did not want to make a mistake where I hit the wall next to him and pinballed myself into the pit, because that would have been just the worst way to lose a fight like this. So I then kind of started nudging him with the back of the robot, trying to get him into a spot that he couldn't crab walk out of. And that is actually what ended up happening. He got to a point where when he swung one way, the front of his wedge hit a seam in the floor, and then when he swung the other way, he hit the wall, and he did both, like he hit both of those hard limits before he'd made any real movement of the robot. Because when you're crab walking, it's all about trying to get a bit of a rhythm going, and those two things were stopping his rhythm, so he got counted out, and we got the win on that one, which is quite cool. So now we are on in through to the finals, and who do we meet in the finals but none other than Anty-matter. So we're ending the day the same way we started it. We're fighting Anty-matter. Let's hope this time we don't throw ourselves out of the arena. We threw ourselves out of the arena. Oh, man. I mean, the interesting thing with this fight is that, I mean, even though it was short, he actually didn't take that much damage because they had refilled all of the holes from the first fight with hot glue to kind of keep the fights going. So all they did in this fight was just kind of like rip out some of the hot glue, and not even as much hot glue as they put down. So there was still hot glue in some of those wounds because the hot glue kind of gave a little bit more than the plastic did. So I didn't actually take as many chunks out of him even as the first fight. And then of course we threw ourselves up on the tabletop, and that is where that fight ends. So that of course does mean though we get second for the month on this one with Guesstimate. So that's pretty good, considering that we have the ability to throw ourselves out of the arena. We're actually doing pretty well with Guesstimate at this point in time. Now, you might be wondering why the weapon is busted like this. Well, there was a rumble at the end of the day. Let's take a look at that. And there you have it. Now you know how I lost the weapon. Slamming into Bot Ox, I broke the weapon itself. It's actually snapped the motor shaft off this thing. And then in doing so, it also actually took out the switch. We hit our own switch and turned ourselves off in the process there. So that was a fun one. That was a fun month. I hope you guys have enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next video.